Midnight behind a dive bar. A Hell's Angel stubs out his cigarette. A tiny hand shoots from behind a rusted dumpster and latches onto his boot. A black boy, 10, bone-thin, eyes glossy with terror. Don't let them take me. The whisper is raw. Rook freezes. Flashlights sweep the alley, two men hunting. Slowly, he reaches down, wraps a tattooed arm around the child and pulls him up into the shadow of his cut. What Rook didn't know yet was that the men closing in weren't strangers. They were family. And the boy's terrified whisper was the beginning of a secret so dark it would turn an outlaw motorcycle club into an army of protectors. The story he was about to hear would rewrite everything. The boy's name was Marcus. He was 10 years old, and he hadn't felt safe in over a year. Not since his mother started working the overnight shift at the packaging plant, leaving him with her brother, Terrence. Terrence was the kind of uncle who called himself a babysitter but spent the grocery money on scratch-offs. His son Darnell, 22 and twice the size of any man in the neighborhood, had a different hustle. A month after they moved in, Darnell brought a stranger to the apartment. An older man with cash in his pocket and a smile that made Marcus's stomach twist. That night, Marcus learned what his cousin meant by rent. He was 9 years old. It got worse every weekend. Terrence and Darnell turned his bedroom into a revolving door. Men from the gas station, from the bar, from the parking lot of the dollar store. Marcus tried to tell his mother once. The next morning, Darnell broke his wrist and said it was a bike accident. After that, Marcus stopped speaking. He learned to disappear inside his own head. But tonight, something cracked. They'd taken him to the bar across town, a place with a dented neon sign and a back alley that smelled like old beer and rotting cardboard. Darnell was inside, negotiating with a new buyer. Terrence had leaned down and whispered, "You run again. I'll find your mama and do her like we do you." Then he shoved Marcus against the dumpster and went to join his son. Marcus sat alone in the dark, his thin back pressed to cold metal, listening to the wet slap of footsteps in the alley. Two flashlights swept the ground, drawing closer. He could hear Terrence's voice, low and furious. "Find him, he's here somewhere." Then a heavier set of boots scraped the pavement and a shadow blocked the dim bulb above the bar's back door. A man in a leather vest, bearded, massive, lit a cigarette. A winged skull gleamed on his back. Marcus didn't think. He lunged forward and grabbed the man's boot. "Don't let them take me." The whisper scratched out of his throat like a prayer. The biker looked down, met the boy's eyes, and didn't flinch. He saw the two men with flashlights hesitate near the far dumpsters, then slowly back away into the dark. Rook reached down, pulled the trembling child into the shadow of his cut, and growled, "Nobody's taking you anywhere, kid." He knelt, expecting a story of bullies or a runaway. Instead, Marcus's cracked lips spilled a secret so foul the air itself seemed to freeze. Those men were his uncle and his cousin. The ones who'd been selling his body to strangers for cash for over a year. Tonight, he finally ran. Rook's jaw turned to iron. He pulled out his phone, not to dial 911, but to wake up a retired judge he knew in the chapter, a man who hadn't worn a robe in a decade but still carried more weight than any cop in the county. That call was about to ignite a firestorm. Rook dialed the number from memory. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "This better be good." "Judge Harmon, it's Rook. I got a situation. 10-year-old kid hiding behind a dumpster running from two men who have been pimping him out for over a year. His own uncle and cousin." There was a long pause. "Where are you?" "The Rusty Nail back alley. I got the boy with me. The men ran when I stepped in, but they're still in the area. Don't call the cops yet. Let me make a call first." "Keep that child safe, Rook. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Marcus was shivering, still pressed against Rook's leather. The big biker draped his cut over the boy's shoulders. The death's head patch, which usually sent a message of menace, now draped over a child like a makeshift blanket. Marcus looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "Are you going to hurt them?" Rook's jaw tightened. "No, kid. We're going to make sure they never hurt you again." Judge Harmon arrived in a black Lincoln, not his robe. He was 70, silver-haired, a former Marine judge advocate, now retired but still consulting for the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force on the quiet. He took one look at Marcus and his face turned to stone. "This isn't just a family matter. If what you're saying is true, these men are part of a network. I've seen it before. We need to get this boy to a safe house and start gathering evidence. Rook nodded. I'll call the club. Within the hour, the president of the Hells Angels chapter, a man they called Preacher, was standing in the clubhouse garage. He was a giant with a gray ponytail and a voice that could quiet a bar fight. Rook explained everything. Preacher listened, then looked at Marcus, who was now wrapped in a blanket sipping hot chocolate from a chipped mug. We ain't exactly the Boy Scouts, he said quietly, but we got a code. You don't touch kids, ever. So here's what we're gonna do. He turned to the room full of members, all 30 of them who'd been woken up by the midnight phone tree. We're gonna protect this child like he's our own blood. We're gonna find the men who did this, and we're gonna hand them over with a bow on top. But we do it smart. We do it legal. I want no cowboy stuff. We got a former judge and a direct line to the FBI. We use it. But there was a problem. Terrence and Darnell had already fled. Their apartment was empty. Neighbors said they'd left in a hurry 30 minutes earlier. The trail was cold. Until one of the younger prospects, a tech-savvy kid they called Mouse, dug through social media and found Darnell's girlfriend posting from a motel 2 counties over. The club went to work. 6 bikes rolled out at dawn, not to cause a ruckus, but as a show of force. They parked across the street from the Pinewood Motel, blocking exits. Inside, Mouse had already cloned Darnell's phone records, revealing a web of communication with a man named Santos, a known associate of a cartel-linked trafficking ring operating out of Houston. This was bigger than a couple of degenerates. It was organized crime. The confrontation was anticlimactic. Darnell came out to his car and found Rook leaning against the door. "Remember me," Rook said. Darnell tried to run, but 2 more bikers cut him off. Inside the motel room, Terrence was found huddled with a needle in his arm, too high to resist. Both men were secured, evidence bagged, and a call made to the FBI field office. By noon, a team of agents was debriefing Marcus in a secure location, while the club members gave statements. The 2 abusers were facing federal charges for trafficking of a minor, with mandatory minimums that would put them away for decades. But the victory was short-lived. When agents raided the motel room, they found a burner phone with text that sent a chill through the investigation. One message, sent just hours earlier, read, "The package has been moved. New buyer confirmed. Arrival Saturday." The package was Marcus, and Saturday was tomorrow. That meant the person who was supposed to receive the boy was still out there, expecting a delivery. And if the network realized the deal had fallen through, they would go after anyone who disrupted it, including a certain motorcycle club. Then the phone in the clubhouse rang. It was Marcus's mother. She was sobbing, her voice breaking. "They took him. They took my boy. She didn't know he was safe. She'd just come home to find Terrence and Darnell gone and a note left on the kitchen table that said, 'We're bringing him back. Don't call police.' But the note was smeared with blood, not Marcus's." Whatever happened next, the Hells Angels were now in the crosshairs of a network that had no intention of letting their prize escape. They'd poked a hornet's nest, and the hornets were already on their way. The blood on the note wasn't Marcus's. It belonged to a neighbor, an elderly woman who had seen the commotion and tried to intervene. Terrence had shoved her to the ground before fleeing. She was alive, but the message was clear. Anyone who got in the way would pay. Angela, Marcus's mother, was now in protective custody at the clubhouse, her hands still shaking as Preacher poured her a cup of coffee and said, "Ma'am, your boy is safe and you're safe here. Nobody gets past us." She broke down, apologizing for leaving her son with those monsters. Preacher just shook his head. "You didn't know. Now we make it right." Meanwhile, the FBI's interrogation of Darnell and Terrence was yielding a map of horror. They had been part of a network that moved children across 5 states. The buyer who was supposed to receive Marcus wasn't some low-level degenerate. His name was Victor Solomon, a man with no criminal record, a respected shipping magnate who owned a fleet of trucks and warehouses from Texas to Ohio. He'd built a front business that transported legitimate goods by day, and by night, hidden compartments carried human cargo. And he'd been doing it for over a decade. Judge Harmon got on a secure video call with the task force. "Solomon, I've known him for years. He's donated to charity, hosted fundraisers. He's untouchable without rock-solid proof." That's when the FBI agent in charge, a woman named Chen, dropped the next bombshell. His phone records show he already received confirmation that the shipment was delayed but forthcoming. He doesn't know Darnell and Terrence were arrested. We have a window, maybe 24 hours, to flip them and run a sting. But if word gets out, Solomon will burn everything and disappear. Preacher stood with Rook and the chapter officers in the garage. So we got a window. Solomon thinks his boys are still bringing the kid. We need to keep that illusion alive. We need to send someone in. That's when Rook stepped forward. I'll go. I can pass for a buyer. We can use my cut and my connections. Tell Solomon the deal changed hands and I'm the new middleman. It was reckless, but it was the only play. Plan was for Rook to contact Solomon's people, arrange a meet, and wear a wire. The FBI would back him up, but the club would be his first line of defense. Rook's first call was to a number extracted from Darnell's phone. A man answered on the second ring. "Who is this?" Rook's voice was ice. "I got the package. Your guys messed up, so I took over. The price just doubled." There was a long pause. "Where are they?" "My business. You want the kid, we meet. Midnight, the old freight yard off Route 9. The line went dead. Then a text came through. "We'll be there, don't be stupid." It was on. But the club's own intelligence network, consisting of a few retired cops and a hacker named Mouse, uncovered something terrifying. Solomon's warehouse wasn't just a distribution point. It was a fortified compound with armed guards, and his schedule showed he was expecting a shipment of 4 more children arriving in 2 days. If the operation failed, those kids were gone forever. The FBI couldn't move without more evidence, so the pressure was on Rook to get Solomon to incriminate himself on tape. That night, the night before the meet, Marcus was in the clubhouse, playing checkers with a prospect named Tiny, a mountain of a man who wept when he heard the boy's story. Angela sat nearby, speaking softly with Hattie, the wife of an old mechanic who'd helped them before. "Wait, no, this is a different story. I'll keep the setting." Angela sat with a few of the club's old ladies who had brought clothes and food. Marcus looked at Rook, who was strapping on his bulletproof vest. "Are you coming back?" Rook knelt down. "Yeah, kid, I promise, and when I do, you're never going to be scared again." Marcus hugged him, and for the first time in a year, the boy believed someone. Then the "wait, it gets worse" moment hit. At exactly 10 o'clock, a van pulled up to the clubhouse gate, headlights cutting through the dark. A man in a suit got out, tossed a package onto the asphalt, and sped away. Preacher opened it. Inside was a child's shoe, a lock of hair, and a photo of Marcus taken through the window of the safe house they were supposed to use. Solomon knew where they were. They'd been compromised. The note read, "Bring the boy to the meeting or we start visiting your families." The Hornets had arrived. And now the Hells Angels weren't just protecting one child. They were going to war to dismantle an entire empire. Preacher didn't flinch. He looked at the photo of Marcus, the lock of hair, the tiny shoe, then turned to the room full of hardened men whose faces had gone pale with fury. "They just made this personal, but they also made a mistake. They told us exactly where they're watching from. The window in that photo, that's the safe house on Grover Street. We moved Marcus 6 hours ago. They're looking at an empty room. Now we own the clock." The club went into full operational lockdown. Mouse traced the photo's metadata to a burner phone pinging from a cell tower near the freight yard. Solomon's men were already in position, expecting to receive their cargo. Rook tightened his vest, checked the wire taped to his chest, and looked at Agent Chen. "I walk in, get him to say the words, and your team moves. The moment he confirms the transaction, we breach. You'll have 30 seconds before it gets loud." Rook nodded, then turned to Preacher. "If I don't come back, make sure the kid gets his scholarship." Preacher gripped his shoulder. "You'll be drinking with us by sunrise." At 11:45, Rook rode alone into the freight yard. The air smelled of diesel and rust. Headlights blinked twice from an open bay door. He killed the engine, walked toward the light, hands visible. Inside, Victor Solomon stood in an immaculate suit, flanked by 4 armed men. He looked Rook up and down. "You're not the usual courier. The usual courier's in federal custody. I'm your new business partner." Solomon smiled without warmth. "Where's the boy?" "In a van outside. I get my money first. 200,000 as agreed." Solomon laughed. "You think I carry that kind of cash? Show me the product, then we talk payment." Rook didn't move. "I'm not doing anything until I know this operation is what I think it is. I need to hear you say it, the whole picture." Solomon's eyes narrowed. He was paranoid but greedy. He stepped closer, voice low. Fine, you want the whole picture. I run logistics. I move cargo from collection points to distribution hubs. The boy you have is one of 12 this quarter. High value, young, no paper trail. He was supposed to be on a truck to a private buyer in New Mexico by Friday. Now enough games. Bring him in or my men will. That was the signal. Rook said calmly, sure, just let me call my driver. He reached for his phone, pressed speed dial, and spoke 2 words. Package confirmed. The bay doors exploded inward. FBI tactical teams flooded the warehouse, flashbangs and shouting. Solomon dove for a hidden door, but 6 Hell's Angels blocked every exit, led by Preacher, who grabbed Solomon by his $3,000 suit jacket and slammed him against a crate. You threatened my family. Now meet her. He pointed to Agent Chen, who snapped handcuffs on Solomon's wrists. The camera was seized, the phones, the computers. Inside a locked office, agents found shipping manifests detailing each child's route, price, and buyer. 4 children already in transit were intercepted within hours at truck stops in Missouri and Indiana. 3 more were liberated from a storage container in Houston. The network was gone. Marcus watched the news from the clubhouse with Angela. He saw Solomon's mugshot flash on the screen. He didn't smile. He just looked at his mother and said, "They're never coming back, right?" Angela pulled him close. "Never, baby, never." But the most surprising detail came 2 weeks later. Judge Harmon called a meeting at the clubhouse. He stood before the chapter, a folded letter in his hand. When I was a prosecutor in '79, I failed to convict a man for trafficking because the jury didn't believe the victim was credible. That man's name was Richard Solomon, Victor's father. He went on to build this empire. I've carried that failure for over 40 years. Because of all of you, I can finally close that file. He unfolded the letter, a formal exoneration request for the victim, and pinned it on the clubhouse wall. The room was silent. Preacher cleared his throat and said, "That's why we open the door when a kid grabs your boot. You never know who's past your healing." The chapter voted that night to establish a permanent safe haven program, partnering with the FBI to protect children in trafficking cases. 200 outlaw bikers, who the world saw as dangerous men, became the most unlikely sanctuary a child could find. And it all started with a whisper behind a dumpster. Today, Marcus is 14, a straight-A student, and Rook's little shadow at the garage. The Safe Haven program has helped over 60 children in 3 years, funded by motorcycle runs and barbecues. The men who once wore the death's head as a warning now wear it as a badge of protection for kids who have nowhere else to turn. But the question that stays with me is this: how many dumpster moments do we walk past every day? How many desperate hands reach out in the dark, only to find a locked door? We hear the stereotypes about outlaw bikers, about people who look different, dress different, live different. But when a 10-year-old boy needed a shield, it wasn't a badge that saved him. It was a leather vest and a man who didn't hesitate. The judge who spent 40 years carrying guilt found redemption. A mother who thought she lost everything got her son back. And a club that the world had written off as outlaws became the hero a child never expected. So I'll ask you the same question they asked themselves that night. Would you have opened the door? Would you have looked past the tattoos and the reputation and seen a protector? Because the truth is, we never really know who will be the one to save us. If this story moved you, leave a heart in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to remember that humanity still exists in the most unexpected places. And subscribe so you never miss the next story that proves the world is more surprising than we think. Until next time, stay curious.